If you love fantasy football, this video will absolutely blow your mind. I'm going to share some statistics that are going to absolutely be mind-blowing and also give you the number one running back in the NFL. Who is it and what is absolutely holding him back from breaking every single NFL running back record? This is the video to watch if you love running backs, if you love fantasy football, if you're passionate. These stats in my hand are going to blow your mind. If you're new to the channel, all I ask is that you hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, and turn on the bell. I'm keeping it going in the off season, in these car or these SUV rants, just waiting for my kids to pick them up. I'm like, why not put out content that I love, share my passion with you guys? So if you guys want these daily rants, if you want the number one podcast, we're going to keep it rolling here. 2025 fantasy football rankings, stats, sleepers, breakouts. I know it's your passion. I want to continue to share this passion with you all year round. So hit the subscribe button and drop a comment below and questions if you have any. And also I want your feedback if you actually think this guy, once I tell you who it is he the best running back? And what should the situation be like? Well, we'll get to what I mean exactly, but I want to get your feedback on this because this guy's being held back significantly, okay? Now, if you follow me on social, you know who this guy is. Follow my Insta Fantasy Football accounts for all social media channels. Turn on the bell here. But the guy I'm talking about, the number one running back in the NFL, the best running back in the NFL, the most talented running back in the NFL, the most explosive running back in the NFL, the best pass catching back in the NFL, the most elusive running back in the NFL, the most everything is Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, now let's talk about his stats. What held him back? How does he compare to guys that had a full workload? Guys like Saquon Barkley, guys like CMC. Let's talk about it. Jahmyr Gibbs, okay? Man, look, listen to these are the stats that are going to blow your mind. 250 attempts, 1,412 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per carry, 52 receptions, 517 receiving yards for 4 touchdowns. Number one, listen to this. Number one in fantasy points, and he had Montgomery there pretty much the entire season. Listen to these stats, okay? On a game-to-game basis, the last 5 games without Montgomery, 27.6 points, 29.9 points, 25.4, 26.3 fantasy points, and 46 fantasy points the last 5 games he played. Listen to this. It gets even crazier, okay? Those are the last 5 games without Montgomery. This guy beat, okay? And I'll tell you what's holding him back, and I need your feedback here because it bothers me because I see the talent, okay? And by the way, this guy would shatter every fantasy football, every running back record without Montgomery there, okay? Barkley had less, I want to emphasize, less fantasy points than Jahmyr Gibbs. He had 355 compared to the 362.9 PPR fantasy points that Jahmyr Gibbs had, 355 for Saquon with, listen to this, 95 more rushing attempts. And this was a historical year for Saquon. Now, Saquon did actually beat Gibbs in rushing yards because, again, 775 went to Montgomery. We'll talk about that in a second. He beat him in rushing yards, right? But Gibbs beat him in rushing touchdowns. He beat him in receiving yards. He beat him in receptions. And he beat him in fantasy points. Jahmyr Gibbs beat him on every metric with 95 less attempts. Okay, this is huge. And he beat him in fantasy points. He crushed him. So what's pissing me off is very simple. Okay, now I did some math here. You won't even believe how many fantasy points Jahmyr Gibbs would have ended up with if Montgomery wasn't there. And I guess so many people stick up for David Montgomery. He should be there. The guy sucks. He's a product of the offense. If you remember him on the Bears, Tariq Cohen was outperforming him on the Bears. And Tariq Cohen sucked more than any other running back in the NFL. He's like Devin Singletary. That's how bad he is. So I look at the situation. This is what David Montgomery stole away, literally robbed him. It was like pure theft away from my running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy that I love. And should you draft Jahmyr Gibbs next year? We'll talk about that in a second. David Montgomery stole 775 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground. I did some math. I'm not a very good mathematician. Check this out. 77 points on the ground. We're looking at 10 points per whatever. I did some math. Anyway, it's 80 points. Let's say 80 points in rushing yards, approximately 80 points in rushing yards. You know, you're looking at 10, every 10 yards is a point. Let's just say 80 points. And then his rushing touchdowns were around, let's say 6 points at most leagues, 4 to 6 points. 6 points is kind of the standard. 6 points for rushing touchdown, that's 1272. Jahmyr Gibbs, if you add his 362.9 to the 149 points that David Montgomery stole, this guy stole 185 attempts, only averaged 4.2 yards per carry compared to Jahmyr Gibbs at 5.6. Listen to this. Jahmyr Gibbs would have shattered every record, okay? He would have had 511 fantasy points. Okay, this is absolutely insane. 511 fantasy points. CMC, to put it in perspective, last year had 391 fantasy points, pretty much historic year for him. Okay, he would have smashed Eric Dickerson's record. I didn't do the math in front of me, but do the math. 1,412 plus 775. Actually, that's what David Montgomery had. Okay, he was averaging 4.2 yards per carry. Gibbs does more when he has the ball in his hands. So the 185 attempts for 775 yards, Gibbs would have easily had 1,000 compared to 775 that Montgomery had. So that puts, I'm going to anticipate, that would have put Jahmyr Gibbs at 2,412 rushing yards. I would say 30 touchdowns on the ground. And we're talking a ton of, dude, 550 fantasy points. And he would have broke Dickerson's record. Montgomery is really holding him back. Now, some people say, well, you need Montgomery because it keeps Jahmyr Gibbs fresh and it keeps him healthy. Gibbs is fine. He's in a good offense. He can get it done. He's young. He's capable. He's strong. He's explosive. We've seen tons of running backs carry the workload before. Guys like Derrick Henry, 350 plus attempts. These guys are young. They're dynamic. They're strong. They got the best trainers, the best training. They're fine. Okay? So I want you guys to answer the question because I'm pissed off. Should they still be a committee, or should, at this point, because what we've seen from Gibbs, apparently Montgomery's coming back, divisional round, it's in the playoffs. Should Montgomery stay benched? Does Jahmyr Gibbs deserve a full workload, or would he perform well if Montgomery was completely out and he had the full workload? How would he fare? Like, how would he do if Montgomery wasn't there? Because I really don't like Montgomery stealing away that very important and crucial volume from our Jahmyr Gibbs, who would have broke every running back record. But anyway, I had to share this with you because it's just absolutely wild. I'm looking at these numbers, absolutely wild to know that Jahmyr Gibbs is being held back by David Montgomery, who's subpar. And people will argue with me and say, well, David Montgomery is good. He's not. I hate to, like, he's just not. He's not on the level Jahmyr Gibbs is on. And I've given you, numbers don't lie. He's averaging more yards per carry. Without Montgomery there, he's crushing it. He's literally breaking every record. On paper, he's on pace to break every record, but he's held back because there's a running back there. And this sucks. Once you got committees, you're hindering generational talent from breaking records. And we saw this happen with Saquon, who was 100 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's record. And mind you, he needed 17 games compared to the 16 that Dickerson had, but he still would have broke the record and he could have shattered it, right? But they held him back. They put him on the bench to preserve him. Why? Why do you sit somebody? You sit somebody because of fear. That's the only reason. We're afraid he's going to get hurt. We're afraid we're going to not make the playoffs without him, blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't be living from a lack mentality and a fear mentality. You should be living from a prosperous, thriving mentality and a pedal to the metal, put your pedal down and go for it, full throttle mentality. And that's why I love human achievements. I love when Usain Bolt broke the 100-yard dash. I love it when people break the 3 or 4 minute mile, whatever. I love competitive nature. What I don't love is when people are hindered and held back from their true potential, which is what happened with Saquon Barkley, which is what happened with Jahmyr Gibbs. And the NFL continues to run these committees, and this needs to stop. So let me know, do you want this to stop? Do you think Montgomery should be there? Or should Jahmyr Gibbs be running alone for next year? And also, should we draft Jahmyr Gibbs this upcoming year with Montgomery there? And because he's going to be like a first overall running back because they're doing copy and paste, right? So he's going to be a top 3 pick. But Montgomery is still going to pass away volume from Gibbs unless you pray he gets hurt again, which, again, you shouldn't be praying that a player gets hurt. But if you draft a player first overall, which is probably what you're going to end up doing, you know, because he's going to be a top player next year, then you're going to end up wanting Montgomery hurt again so that, you know, Gibbs continues to put these historical numbers up. I got to see how the value is of other running backs in rounds 2 and 3 if I decide to invest in Gibbs as a top 3 pick. If I'm drafting, now typically when I draft, I end up drafting at the tail end, 9th, 10th pick. That's just kind of the lottery that happened this past year for me. So I was ending up getting Saquon, believe it or not, which is great. And Henry, it worked out. But I may be missing out on Gibbs if I'm drafting in the top 5 picks this year. But I would definitely consider him. I love him. But the Montgomery thing, we got to see how he deals with his injury. Does he get hurt again? How does the offseason go? And what are the rumblings from the Detroit Lions? Are they going to continue to run a committee? Or since the amazing performance of Gibbs, have they finally realized that he is the true guy? They don't need Montgomery. something to monitor and realize. But it looks like they are still running that committee, and they are sold on Montgomery because he signed on. It's crazy. And yeah, he does preserve him a bit, but he's definitely holding him back. Let me know what your thoughts are. Love to get your feedback, and I'll keep the SUV rants continuing on for you guys and keeping the fun content rolling. I appreciate you guys. Subscribe, thumbs up, and fantasy content goes year round. We'll keep the content rolling. I appreciate you. Hit the thumbs up. We'll talk soon. Have an outstanding day. Sun's out, but it's very cold here. How's the weather where you're at? Drop the comment below. Talk soon.